All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to have some videos in this class, and for chapter 1 and chapter 2, they're going to not be as long because I want you to do most of the reading. Chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, the material gets a little more complicated, so the videos will be a little longer. I'll do more of the example problems. But say for like just like I said, for the first chapters, please read. What I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight some of the things that students tend to struggle with the most in these particular sections. So start out with section 1.1. So 1.1. Really what we're talking about are essentially like data, and I'm going to show some definitions up there, things that you really should have some kind of idea, and I'll just do a quick talk about it. Now this isn't exactly your book, this is a previous edition, but it's got some pictures that I tend to like in it, so for the most part I will use your book when I'm doing the example problems. But for some of these pictures, as far as what types of sampling is done, the pictures are funny and they're kind of cool. So data are collections of observations such as measurements, genders, survey responses, and so on. A single data point is called a datum. Statistics is the science of planning studies and experiments, obtaining data, organizing, summarizing, presenting, analyzing, and interpreting the data, and then drawing conclusions based on them. So the population, which is important, the population is a complete collection of all measurements or data that are being considered. Now, it would be nice to have a population for all the data that we want, but really, when we do statistics, we tend to take samples, and a sample is a sub-collection of the members of that population. The reason why we tend to take samples is because the population is so large in many cases that we take a sample that is representative of the data, and then we can actually we can get some ideas of we can make conclusions about the population as long as our sample is good. Now, a census is the collection of data from every member of a population, which again is extremely complicated, extremely difficult to do. So types of ways to get data. Now, this is one big red flag, this voluntary response sample. A voluntary response sample is one in which the respondents themselves decide whether to be included. Now, this could be like a survey. Say I called Art Van yesterday to set up an appointment, and they asked me before I got the call, would you like to take a brief survey? Now, what we know is that would be a voluntary response because I could tell them, yes, I want to take the survey, or no, I don't. Now, the problem with these voluntary response data is the people that tend to take this have very strong opinions. You're either going to get very positive opinions or very negative opinions. So when you take this sample, this voluntary response sample, this sample is not representative of the entire population. It's not representative of the population, which is what we're trying to sample. So really the data that's get from these voluntary response samples is quite worthless. It's not usable. So when we're looking at when you're looking at studies and you're reading stuff, say on Facebook or online, really things that we should be looking at is, how is the data attained? Is it voluntary response, or is it a credible place? So things that we need to be careful of, since we are now a culture of data, we read so much online, we need to make sure, is the information we're reading viable? Is it correct, or is it biased? So other examples of voluntary response, so internet polls, mail-in polls, telephone call polls. And here's kind of a really cool situation. It says, see if I can't find it real quick. Here we go. This is a good one. And you're welcome to read it as I do. I'm just going to kind of briefly summarize it. So this is kind of an idea of a voluntary response. It says Literary Digest magazine conducted a poll in 1936 for the presidential election. And what they did is they sent out 10 million ballots. So this magazine received 2.3 million responses, which is a very large number. That's a huge sample. But unfortunately, when they sent out these ballots, this is now voluntary response. So the people that actually sent back this information is not really representative of the population. So it doesn't matter their responses, since they're not representative of the population. They're not a good predictor. So the polls, these 2.3 million responses incorrectly suggested that Alf Landon would win the presidency, when a much smaller poll, which was done by George Gallup, and you've probably heard of Gallup polls, and they tend to be they tend to be real good because, they're really trying to take a representative sample, but of course, uh, uh, read your polls, check for biases, but the Gallup polls tend to be an unbiased poll. But they actually correctly predicted that Franklin Delano Roosevelt would win. But what's interesting about this is their poll was only 50,000 people. The voluntary response was 2.3 million, but his poll was only 50,000. So it's not the size of your, it's not how many responses you get. Are the responses representative of the population? Since this 50,000 was more representative of the population, he was actually able to correctly predict this win. Now, statistical significance. So, this really is kind of it's really pretty far, but let's talk about statistical significance. It says statistical significance is achieved when in a study when we get a result that is very unlikely to occur by chance. So let's take a look at the two situations. So let's look at the bottom one first because it's easier to talk about. So say we have 100 births, and out of those 100 births, 52 of them are girls. Now, is that statistically significant? Well, we know intuitively that, to get a boy or a girl, it's about a 50% chance you get a boy and a 50% chance you get a girl. It's not exactly that. I think getting a girl is slightly higher, but for this class, we're just going to pretend that it's always going to be 50% for the genders. So is 52 girls significantly high? Well, the big question is 52 far enough from that 50 out of 100, that 50%, 50 out of 100, which would be 50%. Is this 52 higher than the number 50, which is kind of the expected number? Well, what we get when we sample, when we do stuff is we get some fluctuations. Sometimes it's a little high, sometimes it's a little low. So through this random fluctuation of the sample of 100, we can kind of expect it not to always be exactly 50. Sometimes it'll land on 50, sometimes it'll be a different number. But this fluctuation is going to be in the realm of not too far away. So say this could even be 56, and I wouldn't say significantly high. It might even be 60, and I might not say significantly high. But we know there's a number out there, maybe 75, maybe 60. I don't know. There's got to be a number in your gut that you have to say, well, that's too high. That's too far past that 50 out of 100 that we're actually expecting. Now, right now, we're just taking intuition that 52 is close enough. Now, intuition definitely tells us that 98 out of 100 is definitely statistically significant because that is so far beyond that 50. But there's a number in there statistically that we can say, yep, that's too far. And we're going to learn that in later chapters, what that cutoff will be. And that cutoff will actually be, it will depend on our confidence eventually. And we'll talk about confidence levels. And that's section 1.1 in a nutshell. So please read the section. I'm going to move on to section 2.2.